Today we're gonna talk about 24 characters that Kishimoto literally forgot existed. And when I say Kishimoto forgot, it's not an anecdote. They really disappear from the series after a certain point and never show up again. And no, I'm not gonna count characters that die or something like that. I'm just gonna count characters that showed up in the story and didn't have a completed character arc, and even may have had a few setups that they would probably pay off later in the story. However, the characters simply vanish from the narrative of Naruto. And they're not gonna be characters like Yamato and Anko that you can say, yeah, Kishimoto forgot about them in the war arc, for example, because they don't do anything in the entire arc. They just show up here and there because they were captured by Kabuto, but clearly you knew what was going on with those characters, and they even show up a little bit. Those characters on this list, they are nowhere to be seen in Naruto for one reason or another, and we're gonna talk about whether or not that was a good decision, a bad decision, if those characters would have been interesting to be explored a little bit more, and also don't forget I'm only talking about the manga here. Some of these characters have additional filler episodes in the anime, but those don't count. Starting off with number 1, Aoba Yamashiro, the guy with sunglasses that accompanies Naruto to Turtle Island, who has the crow jutsu which he taught to Itachi, and explaining why this guy is actually a pretty big deal. Kabuto notices his presence in the Turtle Island and is kind of afraid of being in his presence, and he's had this very minor presence throughout the entire Naruto series, always on the background. Sometimes he does a couple of things, but the strange thing is that after he goes to Turtle Island, fights off Kisame, tries to read his mind, and then there's the fight against Kabuto, he vanishes from the story, and he is a pretty powerful guy. And let's be real, when we reach the war arc with those armies of thousands of ninjas, when you needed a lot of background characters, putting him there wouldn't be a bad idea. He would definitely be better than just a random extra, because at least we know something about him and may have a tiny connection to him. So if he dies or if something bad happens to him, we're actually gonna feel something, unlike what we feel when a random ninja gets killed by a white Zetsu, for example. In the anime, we see a small scene of him interacting with Inoichi, and it's pretty much that he gets even in the anime. He joins the communication corps of the Ninja Alliance, and he actually survives the war, but in the manga, he just disappears. For number 2, we're gonna have Baki, and this is an interesting one. Baki was the sensei of the Sand Team during the Chunin exams, and he had a pretty active role during that arc. He was the liaison that was exchanging information between Orochimaru and the Kazekage. He kills Hayate, and he plays an important role in the invasion of the Leaf Village by the Sand and the Sound. He also had a very distinct and interesting design that you would assume was going to be a design for a pretty important character in the story. Of course, I'm not talking he would be as important as somebody like Kakashi or even Guy, but because he was the sensei of, let's say, the second most important team in the Chunin exams, because Gaara is the main antagonist of the Chunin exams, that he would at least have some relevance in the Naruto story, which doesn't actually happen. After the Chunin exams, he only has a pretty minor role in the Kazekage rescue arc, when he doesn't even have a fight or anything. We see that he has become a counselor for the Sand Village, and that's pretty much it. He doesn't do anything else in the entire story. The last time we actually see the guy is when Gaara is leaving for the 5 Kage Summit among a crowd in a pretty small panel. And if you ask me, I don't care if he became a counselor of the Leaf Village. Baki is pretty young. He should have gone to the 4th Great Ninja War. I don't know why they wouldn't do that. Also, I don't know why Kishimoto wouldn't simply include him there. You don't even have to give him a major fight or anything, you just have to put him in the midst. But no, he simply disappears. There aren't even any fillers about the guy or anything like that, unlike many characters on this list. Which is unfortunate because he had some pretty cool jutsus, an interesting personality, and a decent amount of potential. Also, exploring a ninja from another village that's not the Leaf is an interesting thing for you to do, especially when there was already set up for you to do that with him ever since the Chunin exams. For number 3, we have Yugao, and I put her right after Baki here. This list is in no particular order, but I put her behind Baki because she's actually very much connected to him. After all, Baki killed her lover, Hayate, and as she is mounting the counterattack of the Leaf Village against the invaders, Orochimaru's troops and the Sand troops as well, she vows to avenge Hayate, and that would probably mean doing something against Baki, right? I mean, they didn't know who exactly killed Hayate. The Leaf Village wasn't aware of that. They just knew that they were going to be attacked, but it could make for very interesting drama if eventually Yugao had to fight against Baki and she finds out it was him who killed Hayate, or even if she was fighting alongside Baki during the war arc itself, and that's when she finds out that he was the one who killed Hayate. It could have been very interesting to see that. Unfortunately, we just don't, and she gets a filler episode in the middle of the war, which really contradicts her entire character, because now all of a sudden she's afraid to fight. She's no longer pursuing that revenge or anything like that, even though we actually see her in the pain arc protecting Tsunade on the rooftop of the Hokage's office as Tsunade sending chakra to the village and protecting them with Katsuyu and everything. That was actually the last time we see her in the manga, but then that war arc filler really contradicts that, but it's filler, so it doesn't really count. A little disappointing, but okay, she was very minor. Number 4, we have Yoroi Akado, the guy who fought against Sasuke in the preliminaries of the Chunin exams, and was the first time we really saw somebody absorbing chakra in the Naruto series. An ability that becomes really ubiquitous later in Naruto Shippuden, but he was the start of it all. His ability to essentially suck the chakra out of whoever he touches was pretty effective, especially when he fought against somebody like Sasuke who couldn't use chakra because the curse mark he had just gotten, making it very difficult for Sasuke to handle him, especially because Sasuke couldn't use jutsus, he could only use taijutsu, and the only reason Sasuke actually beat the guy was because he had copied Rock Lee's movements beforehand. And even though he was one of Kabuto's partners there and a spy for Orochimaru, he never shows up again in the story. Even when Sasuke is in the hideout with Orochimaru and everything like that, even when we get to see more of Orochimaru's hideout before Sasuke even shows up there, he's nowhere to be seen, which is kind of a missed opportunity to me. It would have been kind of interesting to see an interaction between an older Sasuke in the hideout with Yoroi, and it would have been interesting to see more characters we knew of in the Orochimaru hideout itself. His powers could be even expanded upon, and you could make him a minor antagonist in Naruto Shippuden, for example. For number 5, we have a very similar situation to Yoroi, which is going to be Mizumi Tsurugi's character. It was the other guy in Kabuto's team. He was the one capable of stretching his limbs and everything. Fought against Kankuro in the preliminaries and got pretty much stomped, but you know, after that he doesn't do anything else, even though his powers are also pretty damn unique. And to be honest with you, when I was younger, I just assumed he had died against Kankuro, but no, at least according to the filler episodes, because both Yoroi and Mizumi show up in fillers in Naruto Part 1, but like, Kankuro brutalized him. I don't know how he survived that, but anyways. Same situation as Yoroi. It could have been interesting to see him later, but not a major deal. It's not every ninja you encounter in the shinobi world that you will encounter again. It's just that sometimes you waste a little bit of potential when you don't reuse characters that had some development beforehand. For instance, it could have been somewhat interesting if instead of Sasuke recruiting Karin for his team, he recruited Yoroi. Their abilities are somewhat similar. Yes, of course, Karin dishes out chakra and heals you, and Yoroi sucks it and gets it for himself, but you could simply give him an upgrade and give him healing capabilities as well, kind of like Karin, except that then you probably wouldn't bite him to get the healing. But anyways, now for number 6 and 7, I'm gonna group them together because they are pretty much linked characters, and they're going to be Teuchi and Ayame, the Ichiraku ramen shop owners. Teuchi is the famous ramen guy, the Sage of Six Bowls, and Ayame is his daughter. Now obviously these characters are much more minor because they're not even combatants or anything like that, but they always show up when Naruto goes to Ichiraku ramen, which happens decently often in the Naruto series. And for the war arc, which is the longest arc of the series if you count the entire war as just one arc, I prefer to call it a saga, but anyways, they just don't appear at all. Which, yeah, it makes sense for them to not appear there anymore because they're not going to be fighting in the war because they're not ninjas. And no, there were no drafted civilians in the shinobi army, they were all ninjas. And the Leaf Village is not very heavily featured in the war. Yes, Sasuke and his team show up there, but they don't see Ichiraku. It could have been interesting if Sasuke saw Ichiraku ramen, the new shop, because the old one got destroyed during Pei's invasion, and Sasuke could have this memory of him, Naruto, Sakura, and Kakashi in the shop, and something like that, but it doesn't happen. But it's not a major deal for them not to appear during the entire wartime. What's weird to me is that Ichiraku ramen does not show up in the final chapter of the Naruto manga. It may seem like an unimportant detail, and narratively speaking, yeah, it doesn't hold a lot of weight. However, symbolically, Ichiraku ramen was featured in the very first chapter of Naruto, and it was pretty important there. That was when Naruto and Iruka had an important conversation. And not showing Ichiraku ramen in the final chapter of the series seems like an oversight by Kishimoto. Yeah, maybe you wouldn't have Naruto eating ramen there, but just show it. A quick glance would be enough. You don't need Naruto eating there, but you could maybe have some other character eating some ramen, and then you could have Teuchi and Ayame, and if Teuchi died, because I think there's that theory that Teuchi died in Boruto, that's why he's no longer there, whatever. Boruto's not canon, so it doesn't matter. You could have Ayame and just feature Ichiraku ramen in the final chapter. For number 8, we have Ebisu. He is Chiyo's brother. Remember that guy with long eyebrows, the old elder from the Sand Village that was fishing alongside Chiyo when they came to ask for their help? He doesn't do a whole lot, and we don't know if he used to be strong or anything like that. He never fights in the series, but because he was Chiyo's brother and he seemed to know about a lot of things. You would imagine he would have a bigger role later on in the series, he just doesn't. I don't mind this one as much as Baki, for example, because he didn't have nearly as big of a role as Baki did in the Chunin exams. He was played for laughs a couple of times when Shiho was pretending to be dead, and then there's that emotional payoff when he looks at Shiho's dead body and he says, "Oh, you're not gonna wake up, are you?" It wouldn't make too much sense for him to go in the war because he was too old to fight properly, even though Shiho went to fight against Sasori when she was around the same age as he was. So what's your excuse, dude? Just like Baki, the last time we see him in the manga is that one small panel in the 2-page spread that Gaara is leaving for the 5 Kage Summit. For number 9, we have Oboro and his team. If you don't remember his name, Oboro is the Rain Village guy that Team 7 fought in the Forest of Death, and they're the final antagonists of that phase of the exams, which should be a major deal, right? That was an impactful part of the series, but as I've made a video before, this isn't a great fight. But it is somewhat strange that these characters never show up again. Now, they do show up in a filler episode in Naruto Part 1, and because of what they wear, the shinobi gear, those respirators, it feels like they were loyal to Hanzo, but obviously Hanzo had been dead for a while, and Pain/Nagato was ruling the Rain Village, so it would have been interesting to see something like Hanzo loyalists having to work under Pain, and this would have to have been developed in Naruto Shippuden, and it would be difficult to find a specific time for that to happen, but there could have been some interesting things done with the characters afterwards, even though I don't mind them not showing up again because their fight against Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, and Kabuto there wasn't really great or anything like it. And realistically speaking, as a ninja in the Naruto universe, there are many ninjas you're gonna fight against that even if they survive the fight, you're just never going to encounter again, and this is one of them, I guess. For number 10, we have Ebisu. Not Ebisu, Ebisu this time. Konohamaru's sensei. This guy did a couple of things other than being Konohamaru's sensei in Naruto Part 1. He started teaching Naruto on how to walk on water and failed, and then Jiraiya stomps him, and then Jiraiya takes over the training and everything. And in Naruto Shippuden, he is essentially saved by Konohamaru when the Naraka Path was about to kill him. And that's pretty much it. He doesn't appear again, he doesn't have a participation in the war arc, and honestly, I am completely fine with this one. As I've said several times, Konohamaru and his team are low points in the Naruto series, and the Naruto series as a whole would benefit from their deletion, essentially. If you're not aware, 90% of Konohamaru's scenes in the Naruto anime are filler, they're not in the manga, and the ones who are in the manga are bizarre. Most of the time, Konohamaru is used as comic relief, and his comic relief scenes are bad. The only time he has a fight is against Path of Pain, which should have been given to any character from the Konoha 11, and it would have been better. But unlike Konohamaru, Moaigi, and Udon, who have an appearance in the final chapter of the series, Ebisu doesn't have one, and he doesn't have an appearance in the war arc itself, which is a good thing. Nobody cares about him, and I'm kind of glad he didn't show up again. I don't like Ebisu very much, but Konohamaru is much worse. For number 11, we have the Demon Brothers of the Mist Village. Those two brothers who attacked Team 7 as they were going to the Land of Waves. They are schooled by Sasuke, and then Kakashi one-shots him. And yeah, those are that type of enemy you're gonna fight once during your ninja career and never see again. And even though Team 7 didn't kill them, Kakashi just tied them to a tree, they never show up again. Which I'm fine with. They pretty much had no character whatsoever, they were just a build-up for what was to come with Zabuzai and Haku being from the same village, even though they were all rogue ninjas. And yeah, I guess they're gonna be numbers 11 and 12 because they are two characters, even though they could be treated as the same characters. For number 13, we also have an early villain, and now the earliest villain, Mizuki. Don't you think it's kind of weird that Orochimaru was forgiven for attacking the Leaf Village, killing Hiruzen, doing all those horrific experiments, and Mizuki is treated as the worst criminal of all time because he tried to steal a scroll? Well, yes, the scroll had very important vital Leaf Village information with a Shadow Clone Jutsu, a jutsu that if leaked to other villages could put the Leaf Village's security in check, but still the guy is very much mistreated and treated as this major villain when they forgive Orochimaru. I don't understand that. All jokes aside, Mizuki is the classic first chapter antagonist of a shonen series. He's going to somehow challenge the protagonist and lose the fight in the first episode because the first episode of a shonen series has to be a contained story, so you have to finish that mini arc within the first chapter. This is a pretty consistent rule applied throughout pretty much every single battle shonen you're gonna see. Yeah, there are gonna be a few exceptions, but mostly they're gonna be like that. And in many cases, the antagonist of chapter 1, who was defeated in chapter 1, is essentially going to disappear from the story. That's what happens to Mizuki. He only appears in Naruto chapter 1 and never again. Even though he doesn't die or anything, he's just beaten up by Naruto real good, and we just can assume he was locked up in the Leaf Village for the duration of the entire series after that. And there are a few reasons as to why the writers don't like to use those antagonists from the first chapter anymore. Mainly that the series is going to essentially outscale them very easily. Mizuki lost to chapter 1 Naruto very handily, so he no longer poses much of a threat to Naruto or anybody else that shows up, even though he could also grow in strength. But because that antagonist was overcome in the very first chapter, and his arc was entirely done in the first chapter, his defeat arc that is, usually he'll no longer have any space in the narrative. Yes, there is a filler episode when Mizuki is aligned with Orochimaru and he gets a pill that makes him become a tiger or something like that. It's weird as hell, but he never shows up again in the manga. And I'm fine with that. Number 14, we have the Nekoba, or Granny Cats. Remember before Sasuke went to fight Itachi, he stopped by this abandoned city where the old cat lady lived, and he got some equipment. Jugo got his new cloak from a curtain, essentially. Sasuke pays for the goods she provided, and then she says, oh, it's a shame the last two Uchihas have to kill each other now, implying that there is that deeper relationship between the Uchiha clan and the cat lady, and even cats. This relationship is expanded upon in a few bad filler episodes when Itachi, for example, wears cat ears, and there's another filler episode when Team 7 wears cat ears, but we don't know exactly the type of relationship the Uchiha clan had with this lady. Was she just a supplier of the clan? Did she have another type of relationship with them, like a shaman or something like that? We don't know. It's a weird part of the series. I don't really care too much for it. It's not terrible or anything, I just don't really care. And the fact that she never shows up again, yeah, sure, that's completely fine. She's a strange character with a very specific function in the story that could have been skipped over, to be honest, but her presence doesn't diminish the story either. For number 15, we have Iwabe, a member of the Hokage Guard. Iwabe was a Chunin who fought alongside Raido and Genma in the Hokage Guard. He was also a proctor for the written test of the Chunin exams in part 1. He was on that mission when they encountered the Sound Team, and Genma and Raido went to meet them, but Iwabe and Shizune stayed behind. And he doesn't have a whole lot to do in the story. He teleports Mei to the 5 Kage versus Madara battle location, and then they chase after Mu. But after that, he disappears. He doesn't do anything else in the story, which is strange because when the Alliance converges on the Ten Tails to help Naruto and the others out, there are a lot of minor characters that you can see throughout that entire sequence there against the Nine Tails, Madara, and Obito, and they're just not there. Mu gets released because the Edo Tensei is released when they were chasing after Mu and everything, but they just do not converge to the Ten Tails. I guess they were just tired. I don't know. Then again, I'm not so mad about Iwabe no longer being in the story because he doesn't do anything at all. We don't know anything about this guy. We don't even know his personality very much. So him being forgotten, I'm fine with that. The problems are gonna come later when it comes to the Hokage Guard. Mark my words. For number 16, and this is a very interesting one, we have Shiho. No, not Shino, Shiho. Do you remember her? This is a character most people forgot about, and most people don't even know her name. Some people may know her appearance and remember her presence in the story, but not know her name. Her name is Shiho. She was a decryption specialist from the Cipher Corps in the Leaf Village, and she was fundamental in the decryption of the message Jiraiya left on Fukasaku's back in the Pain arc. And why is this a weird one? Well, because of the amount of presence she gets in the story itself. There are a few things going on at the same time as the encryption is happening, regarding Pain and trying to get more information about this powerful enemy. One thing is the interrogation of the ring ninja that Jiraiya captured and sent back to the village before he died, which Ibiki and Inuichi are trying to extract as much information as possible, and there's also the autopsy of the animal path body, which was being held by Shizune, and there were several other medic ninjas helping her out. And obviously those three things are important for you to find more information about the paths of pain, and they help to build up the mystery and eventually the resolution for what the hell is pain? Oh, it's actually Nagato controlling those 6 bodies from a distance. But the decryption phase is given so much more attention in the story. And yet, one of the reasons why was because the decryption also pertained to Naruto himself. He's the main character of the story, and Jiraiya left that message specifically for Naruto to decipher. And it also provides character development for Naruto himself and an interesting connection between Naruto and Jiraiya when Naruto manages to find out, oh, it's the books, because that first character there is not a number, it's not the number 9, it's the Japanese katakana character of Ta. So Naruto figures that out with the help of Shiho, Shikamaru, and Kakashi, and they decipher the code using the book with that character in the title. And so because Naruto is very much related to the decryption of Jiraiya's message, that is given more focus than the autopsy or the interrogation, which are also interesting to see. But because the decryption gets more screen time and page time time in the manga, the characters involved in it also get more screen time. And one of those characters is Shiho, this weird, quirky, scientist-like character that's very smart. And for this very minor character that we didn't even know existed beforehand, she gets a decent amount of page time and dialogue and everything, and we get a decent sense for her personality, and more interestingly, she develops a crush on Shikamaru as they are working on the decryption, because Shikamaru is also assigned by Tsunade to help in that regard. And because of that, I always felt like she was gonna get something else to do in the story later on. At least when it comes to her crush on Shikamaru, it feels like that's a setup for something. Maybe a strange love triangle with Temari, some sort of rivalry, Temari getting jealous of her. I don't know, something, but she completely vanishes after the pain arc. And it's not like she would be a useless character or something like that. She could be pretty interesting to see in a work situation, for example, because she was a shinobi. She wears a headband around her waist, a Leaf Village headband, so obviously she's a ninja. And because of that crush she develops on Shikamaru, and also the screen time amount she gets in the pain arc, I just thought she would have something else to do in the story, but no, Kishimoto just forgets about her. She never appears again, which is unfortunate. She could have had some very interesting developments if she had stuck around for a bit longer, especially regarding Shikamaru's character. For number 17, we have Raido, another member of the Hokage Guard, and a much more powerful member this time. Raido was said to be one of the strongest assassins of the Leaf Village, and he certainly has had a much more bigger presence in the story than Iwabe has had. Yeah, everybody thought he died during the Pain Invasion when the Sound 4 essentially kunai'd him to death, but he survived. I had a few battles after that, I mean group battles and things like that. The one against the Sound 4 and the Sasuke retrieval arc. Now I just realized that Raido got stomped by the Sound 4 twice. He also has a small fight against Kakuzu when they show up to help Team Asuma there. And in the work, just like Iwabe, he was helping out Maid Hirumi against Black Zetsu and everything, and he teleports her to the location of the Madara versus 5 Kage fight, because the 3 guards of the Hokage Guard have to join their hands in order to perform the flying rite and everything like that. But just like Iwabe, he went after Mu and disappeared from the story after Musato Tensei got released. Disappointing. Again, we could have seen him fighting alongside the Alliance when they converge on the Ten Tails. I don't see why this would be a problem. He doesn't even have to do anything particularly interesting. He could just be there. Unfortunately, that was not Kishimoto's plan. For number 18 and 19, I'm gonna group these two characters together because they're very much linked to each other. We have Fukasaku and Shima, arguably the two most powerful animal summons we see in the entire series. We saw how powerful and intelligent they were when Jiraiya fought against Pain. They even came up with strategies for Jiraiya. They used the frog song to catch 3 paths so Jiraiya could defeat them. They enabled Jiraiya to use Sage Mode. Fukasaku is one of the most impactful senseis Naruto ever has, because he's the one who teaches Naruto Sage Mode and Frog Kumite, which allows Naruto to develop all sorts of abilities like tossing the Rasen Shuriken, for example. And in the fight against Pain, they also have a substantial role helping out against all 6 paths, using Genjutsu to stop the animal path summons, coming up with a strategy to leave shadow clones in Naomiyaboku to be summoned there, and then Naruto can recharge Sage Mode. Fukasaku is the one in charge of summoning the clone. Shima is also the one who actually summons Naruto and all the other toes to the Leaf Village. And Fukasaku even dies in that fight and is revived by Rina Tensei later on. After the Pain arc, Fukasaku appears for a little bit when Naruto gets to go and get the key toad so he could release the Nine Tails' seal when he's going to train to master the chakra of the Nine Tails, and that's the last time we get to see any of those two characters. Now yeah, narratively speaking, Fukasaku was more important, but Shima is also an interesting character that complements Fukasaku. But more importantly, they were very powerful and also charismatic, and they disappear. Like, Naruto summons toads twice in the work. The first time is against that small army of white Zetsus when he summons Gamahiro to stomp on them, and then later on in the second 3-way deadlock when Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura create the deadlock, Naruto summons a grown-up Gamakichi. But Fukasaku and Shima, they're definitely more powerful than Gamakichi, and I know Naruto summoned a massive toad because he needed to hop over the many Ten Tails clones there, but I'm just saying Fukasaku and Shima could have been useful during the war arc because of their power. Also, don't forget that the only reason why Fukasaku and Shima didn't stand on Naruto's shoulders like they stood mode on Jiraiya's shoulders to activate Sage mode for Jiraiya and circumvent the disadvantage that you have to stay still to activate Sage mode, because they could stay still on his shoulders and activate it for him, was because the Nine Tails was essentially shoving Fukusaku away every time he tried to stand on Naruto's shoulders, so he just couldn't activate Sage mode for Naruto because the Nine Tails was interfering. But when Naruto befriends the Nine Tails, that will no longer be a problem. You could even say the Nine Tails is very proud and wouldn't want to share Naruto with anyone, but you could have a very funny scene actually of the Nine Tails being a tsundere. Oh no, you can't stand Naruto's shoulders because what, I'm more powerful than you, and then Naruto's like, oh, it's because you're jealous, Nine Tails. It could have been a pretty interesting scene here, and you could have had Fukusaku and Shima help Naruto out in a very important situation, activate Sage mode for him as he was on KCM2. It could have been interesting, but those two characters simply disappear, even though they could have been very useful. For number 20, we have Ibiki Morino, the main proctor of the first phase of the Chunin exams, the written test, which is a very underrated part of the series, the master interrogator of the Leaf Village. Ibiki's cool, man. What can I say? His design is cool, the way he administers the test on those Genins is really interesting as well, and he has this very complex personality when on the outside he seems like this brutal guy that will do anything to extract information and will be ruthless to his enemies, but deep down, he's a pretty nice guy and very understandable of others' feelings. And you can see how he feels when he realizes Naruto passed without answering a single question on the test. He doesn't find that insulting, he finds that amusing and actually likes that it happened. In Naruto Shippuden, he has a few appearances. He was one of the guys in charge for the interrogation of that Rain Ninja, as I said before. When Pain actually attacks, he gets to, have a little bit of a scuffle against the human path. In the anime, they give the Iron Maiden scene when he fights against the Animal Path summons, and he used that weird cage in the anime to try and interrogate the Animal Path, but it didn't work because the Animal Path and the paths, they don't feel pain. Ironic. We also get to see him briefly in Kisame's flashback, when Kisame has to kill his teammates because otherwise Ibiki would extract every single bit of intel he could from them, and that was Kisame's mission if they failed. And then he gets to interrogate Karen when she is brought to the Leaf Village, and that's it. He disappears. He does not have a participation in the work in any shape or form. We never see him again. We don't even know if he survives. Well, we know he survived because there are some fillers after the work that he's featured in, but, it would have been interesting to see him in the war and how he could use his abilities in this very strange situation, because extracting intel from White Zetsus and Edo Tenseis wouldn't be exactly easy, maybe even impossible, because they just wouldn't fall for his psychological tricks and methods, because, well, they're not human, and the Edo Tenseis are undead soldiers that can have their minds wiped if Kabuto wishes to. But seeing him again in any capacity, maybe if there were traitors within the Alliance, traitors that found out about the Infinite Tsukiyomi plan and were actually liking the plan, and let's help the other team out. Ibiki could interrogate people to try and find moles within the Alliance itself. This could create tension in the story, make the world building more believable, and give Ibiki a very cool role in the war. Never happened though, unfortunately. For number 21, we have Torune Aburame, Danzo's strongest soldier. A very cool character with an interesting ability. The nano beetles are nasty. You touch somebody, they are dead if you want them to be. Obito had to counter that jutsu by discarding a Zetsu arm, the arm that he was using because he was infected by the nano beetles. So this was one of the guys that actually managed to deal damage against Obito, who is very difficult to deal damage against. I mean, after he gets Kamui, that is. A Root Ambu member who is very interesting, from a very interesting and underdeveloped and underappreciated clan, which is the Aburame clan. I mean, Shino is a character that deserved way more than he actually got in the Naruto series, especially Naruto Shippuden, but he is not technically forgotten because he is in the war, he does things in the war, and he is in the final episode, albeit the things he does in the war and even in the final episode are not interesting at all. Torune is like a Shino that's darker than Shino because he joins the Root Ambu, and he has even stranger powers that could be even more interesting. But he is actually forgotten because, yeah, he has the fight against Obito, he technically gets captured and defeated there, but then when Obito asks Kabuto to explain how the Edo Tensei Jutsu works, he regurgitates both Fu and Torune from his Kamui and tells Kabuto to use the Edo Tensei Jutsu there. He kills Torune by snapping his neck and then orders Kabuto to use the Edo Tensei, using Fu's body as the sacrifice to create a Torune Edo Tensei. And that's exactly what happens. Kabuto explains the jutsu by using the jutsu on Fu as a sacrifice to bring Torune back as an Edo Tensei. And Kabuto even puts a tag on Torune, meaning that he was going to have control over that Edo Tensei and presumably use it for the war war effort. But no, that's the last time Torune appears in the series. There isn't even a quick glance of Torune fighting against somebody in the Alliance or his Edo Tensei getting released. No, nothing. Yes, there's a filler episode when Shiho fights against Torune, which is actually an interesting matchup because obviously, right, Shiho, the Aburame guy against the Aburame Edo Tensei guy. Casey Naruto has to come and save Shiho, which I don't like, and that episode is not very well written. And obviously, if Kishimoto had written something in the manga, it would have been better. But for such a cool character and such a cool clan, the Aburames don't get anything to do, and it's unfortunate that Torune is also forgotten, just like Shiho was. It's just that Torune is completely forgotten and never appears again. For number 22 and 23, we're gonna group these two characters together because, again, they are very much linked, and they're going to be Koharu and Homura, the two beloved elders of the Leaf Village. Obviously, those two have had a minor role throughout the entire series. They were very much present, especially for political scenes when it came to deciding Hokage roles and what the Hokage was going to do and what they were going to do with Naruto. And because they were always against Tsunade and her wishes towards Naruto, people tend to really hate them. They also sided with Danzo in a few situations, which also makes people hate them a lot. And it's fine for people to hate them. I'm not saying this is a bad sentiment. It's just that the issue I have here is that they vanished from the story, even though they were pretty important characters. And we can see that they definitely were powerful ninjas because they were in the second Hokage's battalion there. When we see Danzo's flashback, we actually see Koharu and Homura young. And if they were in that battalion, it means they were pretty powerful. They were Jonins of the Leaf Village. During the Nine Tails attack, we see them fighting alongside Hiruzen against the Nine Tails itself, and they survived. And they managed to gather so much influence that they became prominent political figures in the Leaf Village. But they vanished just before the war arc begins. Last time we really see them is when they were about to decide the next Hokage after Danzo died and Tsunade was in a coma, and it was gonna be Kakashi, but then, oh no, Tsunade woke up, that's good, but those two are never to be seen again. I'm not saying they should have fought in the war, even though they could probably help being two experienced Jonins, even though they wouldn't be in their primes. I mean, Onoki was probably older than they were, and he was fighting in the war, but not seeing any conclusion to their characters is not very satisfactory. We saw a conclusion to Danzo's character, to Hiruzen's character, to Tsunade's character when it comes to the characters that were adjacent to them, and I'm not saying you should have dedicated an entire arc to develop their characters. You could have just done something quick. And I know a lot of you would have wanted them to die. That could have been done. I mean, Sasuke was in the Leaf Village there, and the Leaf Village was very much exposed, and Sasuke didn't have any love for those two, even though he changes his mind after he hears Hashirama's story. He could have done that before the Hashirama story, I don't know. Moving on to number 24, we have the one and only, the Beast, the Giga Chad, Genma Shiranui, the final member of the Hokage Guard, the man who manages to stop kunais with his toothpick. Just like the other two members of the Guard, after he teleports Mei to the Madara vs 5 Kage battle location and chases after Mu, he disappears from the story and doesn't join the alliance with the Ten Tails fight. Which is really unfortunate because out of those three characters from the Hokage Guard, Genma is by far the most beloved, the most well-liked. His design is really cool, he just has a nice vibe to him, and we never really see him fighting for real. He has an off-screen fight against Baki, who is a Jonin from the Sand Village in the Chunin exams, and it's a stalemate, meaning that he is Jonin level, at least when it comes to fighting capability, even though he is a special Jonin in rank, as far as we know. He could have been promoted in Naruto Shippuden because we know of his rank in Naruto Part 1, but still, the fight against Baki happened in Naruto Part 1, so Genma would have been even more powerful in Shippuden. And the strange thing and disappointing thing is that even in other situations in Naruto Shippuden, like in the Akatsuki suppression arc, when Raido and Aoba participate, Genma doesn't participate in that arc, which I don't like because Genma should have been there. Oh, actually, if Genma was there, he would have solo Kakuzu and Hidan, so that makes sense. He couldn't have been there. Okay, he wasn't in the Pain arc either. Okay, he would have soloed all 6 paths. I know, Kishimoto, you had to remove him from the series, but then you remove him from the war arc because he would have soloed Madara and everybody else. Yeah, no, thinking about it, it actually makes sense for Kishimoto to remove him from the story and forget that Genma exists because he would have rendered all the challenges useless. The only man capable of challenging and defeating Genma would have been the solo king, Hikaku Uchiha. And I remember when he proctored the Chunin exams. If you want to find out who would have actually won the Chunin exams that Genma proctored, watch the video showing up on your screen right now. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you haven't, and please ring notifications because it's not every time YouTube sends my videos around. And thank you so much for watching.